What blessings we have in our community. Now we move on to our Luminary Award, given to the individual who, over an extended period of time, tirelessly gives of him or herself in helping others to obtain equal access, equity, and inclusion in those institutions that influence our lives. To introduce this year's recipient, please join me in welcoming Mr. Eric Watson, consultant for Delhaize America, Food Lion.
Good evening. Getting better than that. Good evening.
Good evening.
No, it's getting late. We're doing okay. Erica, I want to first start by thanking you. You mentioned earlier that you've done this for several years, and your commitment. I do watch you on TV.
Thank you.
So I just want to thank you for committing to the post and being here every night. Thank you. Now, I say that because as a journalist, you did some research on Gerald. As an English major from HBCU, I did research too. Now, Lincoln reported that Gerald was a student, and it said, "We're glad he's gone." At Villanova, I did some research, and they had radical. "We're glad he's gone." B of A said he was contrarian, but he worked for the Charlotte Post, and he can say and do what he wants. So, Gerald, we want to thank you for being Gerald. Please join me in welcoming and thanking Gerald. Before I start, I also want to acknowledge, and I'd ask for table 14 and for the Food Line family. Would you stand and be acknowledged? Thank you. And Kareem and Yandri, get prepared, because I'm a consultant and contractor. You'll be up here next year. Thank you, brothers. So tonight, I'm reflecting on our president's comments in commemorating the 50 years of the March on Washington. And his words were, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. At a time in our country, we found it okay to make it ambiguous about what it is to be right, and ambiguous about what it is to be fair. Charlie Danley is a man that has consistently had convictions about being courageous and consistently had his actions speak louder than his words. Tonight, the Post-Luminary Lifetime Achievement Award is someone who is an educator, a civic leader, a legislator, a veteran, a Golden Bull, a Tar Heel graduate, and a teacher at University Park, where I graduated from elementary school. But as Harvey Gantt said in the Post, which I think is important for us to understand, he's someone who is known to the average person who walks in our community. So on behalf of Food Lion and the Charlotte Post, we're honored to be a sponsor to honor the Luminary Award winner, Charlie Danley. Thank you.
Now I'd like to introduce Attorney James Ferguson, Ferguson, Stein, Chambers, Gresham, and Sumter to the podium.
Thank you very much. It is a great honor and privilege for me to have this opportunity to stand before you tonight and make a presentation to not only a great luminary in his community, state, and nation, but a great friend of mine that I have had the pleasure of knowing for more than 40 years since I came to this community in 1967. So in a sense, my task tonight is both easy and difficult. Easy because no vote needs to be taken for Charlie Danley to be recognized as a luminary. Difficult because I've got to compress more than 40 years of knowledge of this man into a short presentation tonight. I want to thank the Charlotte Post for giving me no limit and for having this in a hotel where many of you can get comfortable and stay all night if we need to. I will be sharing this honor with a great friend of Charlie's and a great friend of mine, Senator Dan Clodfelter, who will come here. Let me just ask, I can't see out in the audience, but I do want to ask all those who have ever heard of a place called Bishopville, South Carolina, to please stand. I think I'm getting about the same number that Gerald got on his request for a billionaire. And for those who have ever visited Bishopville, I think it would be an even fewer number. The reason I ask that question is that tonight, Charlie Danley is a luminary. Many, many years ago, he was an escapee from Bishopville. He is a great educator. He's a great legislator. But he's so much more than that. And sure, he graduated from Johnson C. Smith University. Of course, he got a master's degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And sure, he served as a teacher and an educator in our schools, and he served as a legislator for 18 years and rose to the heights of the legislature and became President pro tem of the North Carolina Senate. And yes, he served on many, many committees in the legislature. And he served on many, many boards and with many organizations in this community. He's done all of those things. He even, when he was in the armed services, serving his country in Korea, did 50 or more parachute jumps. And someone said to me when they were talking to me about Charlie, they said, Fergie, it's not possible for Charlie Danley or anybody else to have done 50 jumps. I said to him, so the impossible for Charlie Danley is nothing unusual. He's been doing that all of his life. It is not that he has achieved and accomplished so much that we recognize him as the luminary for the Charlotte Post tonight. It is why he has done it and how he has done it that makes the difference. Charlie Danley was not just a teacher in the classroom. He was a teacher who, though he came to teaching at a time when he had no resources in the dual system that he had to teach in, but in spite of all of the challenges and all of the handicaps that he faced as a teacher, he found a way to make students who came from, almost all of them came from deprived backgrounds at the time he started as a teacher. He found a way to give them what every student needs, and that is a belief in themselves and a belief that they could achieve and a push to go forward. And he did it naturally. He did it out of a sense of commitment, out of a sense of not just compassion and sympathy, but out of a sense of empathy with those students. And when he became a principal in that same system of deprivation and duality, he approached that job with the knowledge and the belief and the confidence that he could give to those students who were deprived and treated as second class something that would give them some skills to survive in a society that was dead set against them. And he did that. And at a very turbulent time in this community, when our schools finally reached that, when our community finally reached the point where it recognized that everyone was entitled to an equal education, Charlie Danley continued in that system to provide hope and inspiration to students of every kind and color. He was chosen among principals at that time to be one of the few African American principals who would be assigned to a school that had been previously white. And he served in that position with great dignity and honor and integrity, and became recognized as one of the greatest educators in that system and one of the greatest educators in the system that followed that. And after he had done all that he could do in the classroom and in the schoolhouse as a teacher and as a principal of great talent and skill and brilliance and intelligence, he then offered himself into public service. And it was in 1977, I remember, that Charlie Danley offered to serve this community as a city councilman. And he was elected in 1977, and he was elected again and again and again until he decided to retire. And it's not just that he was a city councilman, but he was a city councilman who dedicated himself to the voiceless, the poor, the homeless, the downtrodden, the elderly, those who were the outcasts and on the fringes of society. And he did that not because he was seeking recognition or honor for himself, but he did that because that's what he believed, and that's what he was committed to. And after he had served his community as a city council person, he recognized that he had more to give. And he then offered himself for the legislature. And he was elected again and again and again for 18 years as a senator representing a district in Charlotte in Mecklenburg County, but not just a district. He represented all people. And again, he represented those who needed representation most. Not the rich and the powerful, but those who needed the strong and consistent and steady voice that Charlie Danley offered to them and to this community. And having served for years in the legislature, and having served as President pro tem of the Senate, there came a time when Charlie Danley decided that it was time for him to step aside and have someone else do that job. And you would have thought then that he would have retired and just sat home and rocked. But he didn't do that. He has continued to serve as a mentor, as a guide, as an educator for countless numbers of people who have passed his way and touched his hand. There's never been a time, whether he was in the classroom or out of the classroom, that Charlie Danley wasn't teaching. And often it wasn't teaching by didactics and instruction, it was teaching by example. He is a man who could walk in a room and say nothing and make one of the strongest statements that's ever been made. He was a man who, when he talked, people listened, and he could make a statement without ever having to say a word. All of these things, but there is more. Charlie Danley is a man who, though he has reached the heights of all that can be reached in the society in which he lives, he always finds the time to be attentive to those who are weak, those who are without help, and those who are in need. And he teaches by being an example of how you reach out, not just to princes and potentates, but to paupers and poor peoples as well. And that's what he has done all of his life. Now, the things I've told you about, you would think that anyone who has done all of that and could do as much in a given day as this man does in a given day would retire at night to get some rest. Not Charlie Danley. I've told you about his daytime life, a little bit about it. As the owner of the Excelsior Club, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you something about his nightlife. So after he's done all that he does during the day and should be going home to rest, he comes to the club to relax. And he sets the example for how you relax with dignity and honor and grace, because he is the consummate gentleman. And tonight, we're honoring him as a luminary, but I can tell you from my own experience that he is a luminary in the eyes of every student who has been in his classroom and every student of his who has never been to his classroom at all. He's a luminary to my son who manages the Excelsior Club, and Charlie tells him how to run it every day. And he's a luminary to countless numbers of his former students who come through every night. And I believe they come to see Charlie because he holds class right in the Excelsior Club. So much so, he's been so revered at the club that his admirers at the club came to me and said, "Fergie, we want to have a special chair for Charlie Daniel." I said, "Well, we've never done that before in all the almost 70 years of the club." They said, "I know, but Senator Daniel deserves it." So they went out. I couldn't buy it myself because then everybody in the club would have asked me to buy him a chair. But they went out and bought him a chair. And so the first chair in the Excelsior Club is the Senator Daniel chair. And he holds court there every night, and as his students come by and thank him for the light that he's shown in their lives, he nods and accepts their thanks gracefully. And then he wishes everyone, he tells every one of them, "You be careful out here, you hear?" And they take his advice, and that's why you never have any accidents from people coming from the club. I could go on and on. I could give you some of the specifics of things that happen at the Excelsior Club, but if I did that, they'd run me out of the club tomorrow, because as those of you who have ever been or ever heard of Dirty 30 Thursday at the club, what goes on at the Excelsior Club stays at the Excelsior Club, so I'm not able to give you any details beyond what I've given you. But in all sincerity, I do want to say that our Luminary Award winner tonight, as a luminary does, has been shining light in the lives of students, shining light in the lives of teachers, shining light in the lives of city council persons and legislators all over this city, all over this state, and even over this nation. Because that's the kind of person that he is. He's never done a thing in his life for profit, for power, for possession or privilege. He's only done the many wonderful things he has done and continues to do in his life because of his belief that every student and every person ought to have a chance in life. And to the extent that he has any opportunity to provide that, he has done it all of his life. He continues to do it. And I know, and those of you who know him know, that he will continue to do that as long as he's able to breathe. And it's for that reason, the combination of all of those things, that we join together tonight to honor him as the Charlotte Post Luminary of the Year. Now, I have the privilege, as I said to you, of being joined by Senator Dan Clodfelder, who likewise wants to share with you some things about our luminary. Dan?
Good evening. Gerald Johnson, I can't see you up here either because of the lights. I know you're out there. And I want to thank you for giving me a chance to say some things that really matter to me and to my colleagues who served with Charlie for over a decade in the North Carolina legislature. It's a moving thing to be able to talk about somebody that really has been such a part of our lives in the General Assembly, which is, despite the way it may look to you sometimes, it really is a family. And Charlie has been an important part of that family. He and I have served together in public office for longer than I've served with anyone else over the period of the last 25 years. And although I'm not speaking to you tonight as the official representative of the North Carolina Senate or of any other group, I'm really just giving a personal tribute to Charlie. I want to tell you that I am sure that our mutual colleagues would, every single one of them would join in what I want to tell you and what I need to tell you on behalf of the family, the legislative family that Charlie spent so many years with. We called him Charlie D. We did that because we had to distinguish him from Charlie Albertson, who we called Charlie A. So we had Charlie A and Charlie D. He was not, by today's standards, ever a very showy or a flashy member of the General Assembly, except when it came to his clothes. Charlie D was always far and away the best dressed one among us, and he even managed to teach Senator Basnight color combinations and style and design that none of us thought could ever be done. Charlie, it was really probably one of your most remarkable achievements in the General Assembly. You know, today, public officials who are loud and noisy and showy are a dime a dozen. They're very, very commonplace. And when they're in front of the cameras and the cameras are rolling and everyone is watching them, it's very, very easy to find them saying the right thing, to find them saying brave things and courageous things and to saying the things that people desperately want to hear from their leaders. But I would tell you that I think the true measure of any public servant is what he or she says and doesn't say when the constituents aren't looking. When the press and the talking heads and the bloggers can't see them. And when he or she is alone with their colleagues and they're wrestling among themselves about what to do on the most difficult issues of the day. And Charlie D., I'm going to break a rule here, and you know what the rule is. The rule is that we never, ever, ever talk about caucus business outside the caucus meetings. I can't remember how many times you reminded us of that, but I'm going to break that rule tonight. And I think you'll forgive me, and I hope you'll forgive me, because these folks here need to know some things about you that those of us who spent every day with you in those caucus rooms for the better part of 18 years, the things that we grew to love and to honor and to appreciate about you. You know, when you go into the caucus room, you go into closed doors. There's no press. There's no one watching you. There's no one saying. It's just a small group of you. They're your friends. They're the people you spend time with every day. They're the people you socialize with every evening. It's really easy to go along, to just take the easy way to get along, not to ruffle anyone's feathers. You don't want to irritate or anger your friends and your colleagues. No one will know, and no one will know if you make the quiet compromise, if you make the concession that you really shouldn't make, if you're quiet when you have a duty to speak up. And I think it's tougher. It's tougher to speak the truth and to stand for justice and to insist on the right thing when no one is watching you. And that's what happens in the caucus meetings. Charlie Danley never took the easy way. I marveled at him when we would go into caucus sometimes 4 and 5 times a day, day after day, week after week when the legislature was in session. He was an absolute lion. He never allowed us to dodge an issue, to stray from the task. He always called us back to order. That was the teacher, the principal, Charlie. I remember that. Charlie could pound the table and everyone would become silent. The caucuses are a noisy affair. They're a very loud place. People are constantly speaking on top of one another. A lot of big egos in the room just jostling around and butting up against each other. But when Charlie D. spoke to the caucus, everyone, and I mean everyone, Mark Basnight, Tony Rand, and everyone down to the newest and greenest legislature, everyone got very still. They got very quiet, and they listened. And when he spoke to us, oh, the power of his words. They were direct, clear, strong, always calling us to our better selves, always reminding us that it was our duty to do right by those who had been wronged, always insisting that we take the tough road that leads upward rather than the road that leads down. I can remember very clearly to this day, and I always will, two particular occasions when the caucus was struggling very hard with an important issue about what to do. And there was a lot of fright and a lot of fear of the politics of those issues. And we wrestled mightily among ourselves about how to do the right thing and the fear of doing the unpopular thing. And Charlie Danley on those occasions stood up and he spoke in that loud, booming, clear voice of his. And when he had spoken, it was as plain as could be what exactly we were going to do. And we went out of caucus, and we did what he said. We went out of caucus, and we were the first state in the South to adopt an earned income tax credit for working families. Not a tax break for rich corporations, not a tax break for wealthy billionaires, but an earned income tax credit for working class families in the state of North Carolina, something that had never been done in this state or anywhere else in the South. It was Charlie Danley who made that happen. And on the other occasion, where we struggled mightily with ourselves, and Charlie spoke, and everything was clear again, and we went out of caucus and onto the floor and passed the Racial Justice Act, the first of its kind in the nation. That scene, you had to be there, and that's why it's important for me to tell you this tonight. When you couldn't see him, when you couldn't watch him, Charlie Danley was still doing the right thing. That occasion was repeated more times than the political pundits will ever know, more times than they will ever realize. And that is why it's important for you to hear it tonight. And then in 2010, the world changed. And that other crowd got in. And you sort of know the sequel that we're living day to day after that. And then when we went back into the Democratic caucus, we didn't go into caucus to work out a course of action for the betterment of the state of North Carolina. Often we retreated into caucus in shock and dismay and discouragement. And then an interesting thing happened. Charlie D. took that powerful voice of his out of the caucus, away from the closed door, behind the closed door, and he brought it to the floor of the North Carolina Senate. Time and time again in his last term with us, he again spoke as he had spoken privately to his Democratic colleagues for years in caucus. This time he spoke to our colleagues in the other party, calling them out when they seemed determined to reverse the course of progress in North Carolina, reminding them that they could not expect to have a free hand when they undertook to dismantle a generation of achievement, and that he, Charlie Danley, would be there to tell all the world about their error and their folly. He became for us in the small and diminished minority, in all of our shock and of all of our discouragement, he became a rallying point. When he spoke, all of our spirits lifted. We could again feel that someday, maybe even sooner rather than later, the world would turn again and we could resume the work that had been interrupted. Charlie D., your retirement from the Senate was a cause of sadness for me personally and for all of us who were your colleagues. And though you left us an absolutely first-class replacement, you are still missed by us every single day. And we want you to know always that when you left us in the Senate, you left with our deepest affection, with our highest respect. And I hope you took with you the honor of knowing what we all knew about you, that you were the one who was always there when justice called upon her friends for aid, and that you were the one who was always there when the cause of opportunity for all looked for allies. By your service, you have done us all a great honor, It was an honor to have been your colleague. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please turn your attention to our screens to learn even more about Senator Charlie Dannelly.
Merriam-Webster defines luminary as a person of brilliant achievement and a body that gives light. Educator and Senator Charlie Smith Dannelly, the recipient of this year's Luminary Award, typifies both Webster classifications. And his life is a story of why one's character is the foundation of success in any endeavor.
When I was mayor and he was a member of the council, he was always very polite, respectful of the other person's view. But he didn't allow, simply because he was never always running his mouth, when he wanted his opportunity to speak, he let me know it. And then, of course, he commanded by the way he presented himself.
During the Depression-era South, few of the 2,000 residents of Bishopsville, South Carolina, thought their community would produce much more than cotton. But the son of a local brick mason and homemaker had a vision for their youngest boy and made the best of what they were given to ensure their son reached his potential.
Dad was one of the best mathematicians in the whole county. And he decided that his 3 youngest children needed to go someplace else. So they sent us 22 miles away to Camden, South Carolina, to a private school called Browning Home and Mather Academy.
Dannelly credits his military service, which began at Howard University's ROTC program and ended with a post as the ranking officer of a heavy weapons platoon during the Korean conflict, as a key factor in honing the leadership skills that he would become known for in later years.
It taught me how to lead, I think, because in the military then it was no nonsense. It brought me to where I am. And of course, while in Korea, it was even more so, especially when I was I was the ranking lieutenant in my company, and so they made me the head of the heavy weapons platoon, which a captain was supposed to have that commanding post.
I can think of some very specific times when in our political caucus he would stand up and give his notion of what we should do, and invariably that's what our caucus would do because he was that kind of leader.
When his neighbor Julius Chambers advanced the school busing decision in Swan v. Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education, the hard work of actually integrating the schools had begun, and Charlie Dannelly was a cornerstone leader.
I'll never forget, they took principals of schools and put us in a community college library because they were going to totally integrate the staffs in the schools. And we had to exchange so many black teachers with this school. They had to exchange so many white ones. The principals didn't want to give up their top teachers. And the administration knew who the top teachers were. And they said, you have to share equally. It was tough, man. It was tough.
Serving the needs of McCrory Heights residents through the Interstate 77 highway expansion raised Mr. Dannelly's profile among political leaders and launched a marathon political career fueled by genuine concern for the grassroots people he represented.
The greatest compliment I get when I go out to different venues is, you know what, you're the only politician I see a lot of time. The other day just come around when it's election time.
I know that he cared about his constituents.
Having been a stage for high-profile politicians and premier African-American musical talent, the Excelsior Club is a social and political institution in Charlotte, and any discussion about Charlie Dannelly would be unfinished without mentioning his membership in and affection for this historic club.
Charlie Dannelly is the only person who's ever had his own chair at the Excelsior Club.
the nights that he's here, you usually find him sitting in his chair, which is the #1 chair when you come into the club. And he's there wishing everyone a good night. So he represents all of the ideals about what the club is about. He dresses as the Excelsior man. He conducts himself as the Excelsior man. He engages with others as Mr. Excelsior.
In the end, Charlie Danley's story is indeed a lesson in integrity.
Please welcome the 2013 Luminary Award recipient, Mr. Charlie Danley, retired North Carolina Senator.
I guess I'm supposed to say something, huh? If you notice, I'm the only one without something to read from, because I didn't intend to say anything much. But I'll start by thanking all of you for coming out and supporting this occasion over the years. And I want to thank the Johnsons for having the vision to start this and see it through. I can see Bill now. You may not know that Bill was his daddy, their daddies, looking down, smiling. And Bill and I used to travel all over the CIAA conference. Bill was a sports writer for Johnson C. Smith University, and I was a student there, a dropout student. I came back to college. And Bill and I were great friends. But I want to thank my son and his beautiful wife for coming all the way from California for this occasion. And of course, his name is Charlie Danley also. I didn't have as many as George Foreman did. But and I have extended family here tonight. The Waymers are extended families of mine. The Bray Boys are extended families. The Liggins, they are my extended family. And many others. I should have done that because I see a lot of people as my extended family. But I want to thank Post for this recognition. And on behalf of the wind beneath my wings, who could not be here this evening, but deserves this award more than I do. Without her, this would never happen. And I'll say to you what my fourth grade mom said to me. Son, go live the gospel every day of your life. And when necessary, preach it. Again, I want to thank friends who talked about me, and I started choking up over there when they started talking. I'm a softy. I'm tough too, but I'm a softy. A doctor taught me to cry. That's right. A doctor taught me to cry. And when you cry, ask women, they'll tell you, it relieves a whole lot. I want to say something to people who are in years to come who may be approaching my age. Know when to leave it for young folks, but don't stop being busy. As long as you are able to get up and go and do something, get up and go do something. Because if you sit down in retirement, it'll kill you. But as long as you're active, you may be slower, but as long as you're active, things are better for you. And I'm going to sit down with this one. There may be 1 or 2 or 3 politicians out here, active politicians. I've told some, but they have not heeded my word yet. Every time preachers started preaching about Jesus, they preached about him going into the marketplace. That's where the people are, in the marketplace. And I want to say to you young politicians, if you really want to know what's happening in your districts, go to the marketplace. The people in the marketplace are the ones who will get out and work for nothing to bring up votes to get you back where you want to go. They are the ones, and they recognize, young politicians, that you only come around at election time. That's not good. Always put the people before politics. That's my word to you, young politicians. Thank you very much. I could go on. It's a bad thing to give a politician a microphone with no time limit, but I'm going to stop. Thank you.
Senator Danley, we'd like you to remain on the stage for a special presentation.
Me?
Yes.
Somebody take this out. I'm acting though I'm not so.
We have a special presentation tonight in Senator Danley's honor. The Charlotte Post Foundation is making a donation to Youth Opportunity University at Friendship Missionary Baptist Church, which you helped to found. And in appreciation, that gift is being made tonight. So congratulations to our Luminary, and we hope you accept this honor. Thank you.